But here's the real deal on soy. Soy, I knew enough to think, it's a phytoestrogen. It's a plant-based estrogen. You think, okay, let me back up. 80%, as we've said, of all breast cancers have a little receptor on them for estrogen. When estrogen hits that receptor, it's going to send a signal to the cell to multiply and divide. Estrogen-driven tumors are actually less aggressive and more treatable and curable than cancers without estrogen receptors. But the big beef, the big problem with soy, or so we thought, was that genistein and the other isoflavones have the molecular structure of estrogen such that they could fit into that receptor and then cause that downstream reaction of making it multiply and divide, or so we thought. This was Petri dish stuff. This was rats and mice kind of research. Until 2009, we didn't have human studies. And since then, this is going to blow the lid right off of all the soy myths. Now we know there are two estrogen receptors in your body, alpha and beta. Alpha is on the cancer cell. With 1,600% more affinity, the genistein in your soy is going to hit beta. And what does beta do? It does two fantastic things. It shuts alpha down. So if you're familiar with tamoxifen, which is a drug a lot of breast cancer patients have to take in order to block the estrogen receptor, they block it with a drug called tamoxifen, which is another estrogen lookalike, but deactivates the receptor. Soy deactivates your receptor. Soy also goes out into your peripheral fat cells. Everywhere you have a fat cell, and listen up, because this actually is the direct connection as to why being overweight and obese elevates breast cancer, occurrence, recurrence, and death. So everywhere there's a fat cell, there's an enzyme called aromatase. This enzyme is busy all day converting precursor steroids that come from your adrenal gland, which you're never going to get rid of. So you've always got testosterone, androstenedione. These things are getting converted into estrogen, which can then feed and fuel your cancer. Soy inhibits the aromatase enzyme, the same as a whole nother category of drugs that we give women. So if this is true, the studies should point toward decreases in breast cancer. And in fact, we've got amazing studies with high volume of women. One of them is the Shanghai Women's Study, 73,000 Chinese women. Those who were the highest versus lowest soy consumers had 59% less premenopausal breast cancer. Now, this is an interesting thing about these studies that I'll run through. When I say high versus low soy consumption, for the most part, we're talking 1.5 servings a week. Versus less than that. It's not even, I advocate for 2 to 3 servings a day, which also slashes prostate cancer by 70%. Okay, so another really great study, because it was in American Asian women, but still Asian. So I'll get to multi-ethnic, but
I can't believe how well you know your studies. I mean, it is really remarkable. And I guess you use it to back up everything you say.
I do. I like to be bulletproof, which is why the book. So when I went into the science on soy, that's when I realized I was so embarrassingly wrong. I went to pull the studies to prove that I was right, that you should spit the miso out of your mouth. So it does make me delightful to be married to, because I like to be right all the time. But it did make me into the doctor that I am today. That I must be backed in science if I'm going to publish this out in the world. So the other big study that I loved about showing that soy decreases breast cancer occurrence is in American Asian women. And they, again, only had 1.5 servings a week versus less than that. And they had less than 58% adult onset breast cancer. So this was in childhood. So if they consumed 1.5 servings a week in childhood, they had 58% less breast cancer as an adult. That points toward how important nutrition is in our adolescents. They are so much at the mercy of what is in their own refrigerator at home. They're not old enough yet to really make any thoughtful choices. And we as parents hold all of that power to make their futures as healthy as possible by providing them with these foods. The same kind of studies point toward like higher vegetable intake in youth leads to less prostate and colon cancer later. It's astounding how important good nutrition is at the earliest possible moment, which would be birth. Another favorite study, because it points toward the power of food, even in the presence of those mighty mutations. So there was a study on Korean BRCA mutation carriers, high versus low soy consumption, 43% less breast cancer in a BRCA carrier. Now, I'm not ready to say that I can overcome a BRCA mutation by teaching you diet and lifestyle changes, but if we could only get those studies out there, we might be able to create a regimen that doesn't involve removing breasts and ovaries.
Right.
So all of that I've just said points toward, okay, if you consume soy, you'll have less breast cancer in your life. But wait, what if you have breast cancer? Now you're getting risky, right? Especially if it's estrogen driven, shouldn't you shy away from soy? So back to our alpha and beta receptors, keep that in mind. And the answer is a shocking, resounding, very loud no. You want to purposefully consume soy. So one study looked at estrogen driven women with estrogen driven tumors on tamoxifen. So they were taking that estrogen blocker, and when they had high versus low soy consumption, 60% less breast cancer. All right, maybe it's really all the tamoxifen. Okay, then let's look at another study that is only estrogen negative cancers, doesn't care about estrogen at all, or estrogen driven cancers, they're not taking tamoxifen. This also blew my mind, 32% less mortality. So not just recurrence, a 32% drop in death from breast cancer in an estrogen driven tumor just because they ate the soy. And then there was a 51% drop in the estrogen negative group. So I say that to point toward these anti-neoplastic powers within soy that go beyond the whole estrogen equation. Yeah. And they are anti everything we were talking about. They're anti-angiogenic, anti-inflammatory, and it's all inherent in the soy. So all of the human studies to date show somewhere consistently, it's always around this magic 32% decrease in recurrence and mortality for high versus low soy consumption, but sometimes even higher numbers come up. So there you have it. Soy it up.
Yes, soy it up. Block those hormonally active compounds with the soy. What's your opinion? Because in all my books, I talk about how, we are fans of soy, but we want it to be in more of its whole state, less of its unprocessed state. Do you have an opinion on the soy burgers, the soy dogs, the soy nuggets that are composed of mostly soy protein isolates and concentrates?
Yeah, they've been so divorced from their nutritionally intact components that while it probably isn't the soy protein isolate itself that is going to be harmful, it's everything else that's packed in that, because nobody just scoops that out of a jar and eats it, right? It's always with the oils and the other things that are coming in these highly processed meat-like substitutes. So for sure, if you want to get all the power out of your soy when it comes to anti-cancer power, you want to be consuming it. Honestly, these studies were minimally processed, but your typical stuff. We're talking tofu, soy milk, edamame, soybeans. But if you want to bump it up a small notch, you want to do the fermented soys, tempeh, miso, natto, and tamari. They have even more phytoestrogen power in your body. But that's the group. Everything I just rattled off, everything else that has soy in it is too processed and is probably not powerful in you anymore.
Yep. All right. We just talked about soy. I would love for you to talk about